My name is Bridget Gormley, and on 9/11, I was 10 years old and in school.
Where did you go to school?
I went to school in Brooklyn at this place called Good Shepherd High School, or Good Shepherd Elementary School, neighborhood, local Catholic school.
What was it like? Because I was in Connecticut and I remember like kind of noticing the energy was off with the teachers. Like we didn't know what was happening, but they were like quiet and whispering. And I was like, what's happening? What was your experience? Do you remember
It's kind of
exactly?
like exactly the same almost. Anybody you speak to in the course of this process, they're going to tell you it was a beautiful day. The sky was so blue. It was so nice out. And that was true. That's what I remember. And I remember it because all our windows were open. We had these huge giant windows that we had to use a pole to open, like real old school. So all the windows were open. And then early in the day, probably around like 9, 10, maybe even 8, like kids started getting pulled out of school.
Hmm.
Classes were like 30 people, maybe. And by the end of the day, it was me and 4 other people. My parents left me in school. And one of the kids, it was an old-fashioned school, like I said, so one of the kids used to go home for lunch and would come home back to school. And we're like, Frederick, you better I remember his name. Isn't that crazy? I'm like, you better tell us what's going on. He's like, something bad happened. And we're like, tell us, tell us. I was in the 5th grade, and he's like, a plane crashed. I'm like, well, that's not that bad, right? Like, I mean, it's bad, but like not to warrant this.
Right.
And that's all he told us. And then we went home, and mom picked me up. I'm like, what is going on? She's like, there was a terrorist attack, Bridget. And I was like, and she was so shook, and she was so like not herself. My mom's like one of these people. She's strong, cool, calm, very like collected, methodical, and she was like, you know, freaking out.
Do you think she was freaking out because your dad was like down there or he wasn't down there yet?
Well, it's funny you say that because he was down there, and she's like, Daddy's there, Daddy's there. I'm like, is he all right? And I think she was struggling with the how to say it to me.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? Like, I think she was really having a hard time figuring out in the moment, in like the middle of the chaos, how to tell me people flew planes into the World Trade Center. The World Trade Center collapsed. Everybody's there. We've been attacked, and your father's there.
Right.
But then after she said all that, which I couldn't really understand the gravity of any of it, she said he's okay, right? Like, so he got there after the fact, after the second building collapsed, he was going over the Brooklyn Bridge. Um, so after the fact of saying everything, she's like, he's okay. So that's all I heard, right? Is he
Right.
was he okay? And then you go home and the TV's on and this and that. But even before I left school, like I said, the windows were open. There was something was coming through, like there was a smell coming through, and like everybody was like, "What is that? What is that?" And the teacher said they were doing construction in the schoolyard or whatever it was. They're lying, obviously, but we did smell like something. It was kind of like a acrid, like you ever smell sheetrock?
Yeah.
It smelled like sheetrock was like pulverized, and this is exactly what happened. And then they went like this and just like left it settling in the air. And then when I got home, it was my grandfather's birthday that day.
Oh, wow.
So we went to his birthday party at my aunt's house, like his dinner. I know, I
How
know,
somber.
I know. So like half the men in my family are downtown dealing with this. And we're all kind of just sitting there like, what the fuck is going on? Like this is crazy. Like we're having cake and this is happening.
Right.
Um, but me and all these other kids were out in the street because if you looked up in the sky, like all the papers were floating over to Brooklyn. So
Wow.
all the kids were out in the street with like plastic bags, catching papers out of the sky and on the ground and putting them in the bag. It was like not a game, but like we knew like
It's like out of a movie. Like
it's sick,
that's
man. I mean, when I was young, I was like, I didn't think it was cool or anything like that. It was just kind of like this instinctual thing to do as a child. Like a child, what does a kid do? They chase a butterfly. What does a kid do? Catch burning papers out of the sky. I mean, it depends on what's happening,
right.
you know?
That is true.
Yeah.
Wow. That's crazy. And so, can you share a little bit more about your dad, like what he did, and then on that day, how he went down and
Yeah.
how that process was for you?
Yeah. So, first of all, it's important to say my father never discussed this really with me until
Hmm.
much later. And even then, he didn't really discuss it with me because the way I found out was in a YouTube video that my brother did years later for an AP US history project. where he interviewed my father, and I couldn't believe my father sat there and gave the interview, quite frankly, because like it's shit I never heard. I was like, my mouth agape. But basically, what I learned from that interview, not from him, is that they got the call into the house. It was a whole total recall, I think they call it. It's like when the whole city has to go to a job.
Yep.
Um, and he went and he said that the trucks had left. So what they did is they commandeered a bus, a city bus. So they got on the bus. They told everybody to get off the bus, and they told the driver to take them to Manhattan. When you think about it, it's like really kind of fucked up for that poor guy because he's probably like, I'm not going there. Um, but he went, and I don't know if the bus got stuck going. I don't think it got stuck going into the city, like because of cars that were abandoned. I think he's like, I'm not going into the city.
Hmm.
And then they got off on the Brooklyn Bridge, and they started to walk into downtown. But as they were entering downtown, like the second collapse had happened already. So my father said he walked into this. He's like, Bridget, or not me, but like to my brother, he's like, it was just thick with dust. And he's like, you couldn't see anything. It was dark. Um, I would maybe liken it to how they make Mexico look in the movies, like all
Right.
like sepia and dark. And but he said he was navigating the streets and it was like a ghost town. It's like there was nobody there. It was quiet, and that really was unsettling to him because in a city, New York, nonetheless, there's always some sound going on. And then he made his way down there.
And then was he there every day for like a few weeks, months? Do you know or do you not know at all?
I just remember him being gone a lot. I think he was
Yeah.
down there definitely for like the month of September. I'd say he was definitely down there. And then it got less and less as time went on. Um, because it got to the point where like a lot of those firemen, they and cops and anybody that responded down there, they weren't leaving until they found the people that were missing, right? So like it was kind of like we're not leaving until we find so and so who's not accounted for. But as time went on, rescue became recovery, and they realized like this isn't going to be a reality we want, right? But then even so, when the recovery came, right, when they started finding remains and bodies, people were still down there. They were still waiting for the body. So if they found a person, they would stop everything. They'd blow a whistle. Everything shut down. The machine shut down. Everybody stopped. They would cover the body and they would take it out and they would call whatever department or house who this person belonged to come retrieve it. And they made like a big, it was very ceremonious, right? They tried to give as much respect as they could because they realized like this is how it's going to be, right? This is it.
And it was probably rare to find like a full body of someone there. So
Yeah,
they
yeah, 100%. I think it got to the point where, to speak frankly, I think it kind of gets lost on the civilian population of how gruesome things were down there. Um, but yeah, they were not finding whole bodies, and if they did, they were in no condition for people to be seeing them. And then it was a lot
yeah.
of retrieval of body parts. Do you know what I mean? Like there were people that were assigned to pick up just body parts and bag them so they could be identified by the examiner at a later date, if they could.
Yeah. And that's also probably why I would think that your dad didn't talk about it because he wanted to kind of spare you guys of any of the stuff he witnessed. I don't know if that's how you feel or if that's just who he was he doesn't really talk about that stuff anyways.
I mean, look, my dad's like one of those old school mensch type of men, right? He was a Marine, he was a fireman, like tough man's man. But having said that, I don't think any of those guys were prepared to see what they were seeing. I mean, this is the shit you see on a battlefield,
Right.
after like a carpet bombing. This is the sort of stuff that even when you're trained to see it, I mean, you still have soldiers coming back from war that are all shook up and have PTSD and like can't sleep and, have nightmares and things like that. I mean, those people are quote unquote trained for this sort of work. But
Right.
these guys, I mean, they're trained for it in one sense, but they're not trained to see what they saw. So I think it was just kind of like that initial shock of like he didn't know how to process it. He's certainly not going to tell his 10-year-old kid,
Right.
whatever. Um, but he did tell one story, and it wasn't that he told it. It's kind of like it manifested in his PTSD, I suppose. Um, my mom and him were shopping in the grocery store, and it was summertime, and she was like wearing sandals and had a pedicure, and was like thought she looked cute. I'm sure she did, but he like looked down at her feet and he like flipped out. And my grandmother
Mm.
was there too, so it's I guess a witness to validate everything that it wasn't, my mom's memory or my dad overreacting. But basically, he threw a fit, left the store with my mom and her mother in the store. And my mom goes outside. She's like, "What the fuck's the matter with you? Why didn't you just do that?" And this is like in Vermont, right? Like quaint Vermont, small
Right.
town grocery store,
Not New York.
not New York. And he's in there cursing and like mumbling and throwing a fit. And he leaves. And mom's like, "What's the matter with you? Like, what the fuck was that about?" And he goes, he didn't want to tell her at first. Like, he was like, but she got it out of him. Long story short, and this was in the YouTube video that my brother did, and that's how I found out about it too. He found a foot, my father, and he had to bag
Oh,
it. And when he looked at it, I'll send you the video so you can see it yourself too. But
yeah.
it was the same color nail polish
Oh my
on
God.
the foot. Yeah, and I mean, it's like even when I tell the story, it's kind of like I don't want to say it was sacred to my dad, but like I feel like I'm like kind of airing his dirty laundry a little bit. But just I think it's important to tell because you really see like these triggers and like what they really went through and like how it carries over into grocery shopping in Vermont like X amount of months later, It's like
Yeah.
always there.
Was it like months later or was it years later that that happened?
The story, the
Yeah.
incident, the foot incident, I think in Vermont, it was probably so after the attack, my parents were like, "That's it, we're out of here."
Hmm.
That was kind of like the final straw for them. They already had one foot out of the city because they were kind of trying to retire out, but that was it. So I would think it was still warm out, so it was probably September.
Oh wow.
I
Okay.
mean, it was fresh.
And then, so that video that your brother did, was that a big inspiration in the documentary that you decided to?
Christina, I didn't even know it existed until I was making the documentary.
Oh my God, really?
No, nobody thought to tell me. Nobody was like, "Oh, you should watch Raymond's video." I'm like, "What are you talking about?"
What?
And then I go on the video, and it was like, I'm like, "This is what I've been. This is the missing puzzle piece. This is what I needed to complete." Like it's crazy how things kind of fall into place, and you trust the timing of the universe. I was
Yeah.
halfway through the documentary. Like I was editing, I was stitching it together. It was being woven. And then my mom's like, "You should watch Raymond's video." And I'm like, "I've been doing this for a year and a half." I go, "You're gonna tell me now about Raymond's video?"
Oh my
But
God.
I found it, and it kind of made, like I said, trust the timing of the universe. Perhaps if I found it sooner, it would have been misplaced in the story, or I
Mm.
would let it eat. I would have let it influence the narrative a little bit. But when you have what you want already kind of put, not written in stone, but you kind of have your storyline established, and then you get just extras thrown at you, it's easier to place it than working with it from the beginning. Does
I
that make sense?
totally, that
Yeah,
totally makes sense. And I agree. Like the universe is weird and like you have to just trust it. I'm
yeah.
curious then, like what inspired the start of the documentary then? Like what was was there a moment? Was there a bunch of moments? Because you didn't study docs, did you?
No, I didn't study any of that.
Yeah.
No. I'm like a law school dropout, Christina. It was not my path at
But
all.
you work for a law firm now,
Well,
so
there you
full
go, full
circle.
circle, right? Well, I'm not gonna get into that, but um, when my dad was sick and when he was like essentially dying, and I realized this, I was actually working for a production company that put on an award show for trailers, right? So I was kind of like familiar with production aspect. I was kind of familiar with film, but it was really my first step into it in any regard. Um, and they were really the people that ran that company, the Brady sisters, like really were they were really there for me, right? They really carried me through a dark time, and I'm grateful for them for that. But they also taught me a lot, right? So after everything happened, and I think the important thing to mention too here is that I wasn't fully aware of how bad these post 9/11 health effects were.
Hmm.
Like I always knew it existed. Like it was always like a whisper in the corner of the room, the elephant in the room, perhaps maybe. They let out a peep every once in a while, but it was never discussed. It was never like front page news for me. It was just there. It was kind of like you knew it existed, but you didn't really discuss it, right? Um, and then my dad died from it, and I'm like, oh, this is pretty bad. This is worse than I thought it was. And I started asking around, and you go down rabbit holes and you read up on things. And then it was this epiphany to me. I'm like, this is a whole epidemic that's happening, and nobody's really giving it the time of day it deserves. And I was talking to the Brady sisters about it, And they're like, you should make a movie, like get a camera, like interview some people. Just like I think what they were doing in that moment was giving me an outlet for my grief. Like they saw that I was like a mess, and they saw that I was like doing this research, and then with their background, they're like, try this. And I did.
Hmm.
And then before I knew it, I had a credit card bill from B&H that was like, I don't know, 7 grand. And I was like, I was starting, I didn't have any plan or any training or anything like that. I kind of just hit the ground running. And I think I really needed to do that, do something, If I was working for a book publisher at the time, I might have written a book, you know what I mean? But it just like so
Right.
happened that these were the people kind of guiding me in that direction. And I just started making phone calls and I was like, can I interview you? And people were like very open. Like I was petrified that people were gonna be like, who the hell are you? Get out of here. No. But everybody was like super open. I'd show up. I convinced a friend of mine to like do this with me. And I still can't believe he did it, Jerry. But he did it. And then like now we have a film, So it's pretty cool.
You made it happen.
I
That's
did it, man.
insane.
If you want something done right, you gotta do it yourself, right? So what they say.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Do you think that doing the documentary did help you like process things and
100%.
yeah.
100%. Yeah, 100%. It gave me an outlet. It was kind of like going back to school. It was like I went back to school in a sense, and I was learning from all these different people, things I didn't know, and then they were telling me to meet so and so, and you should talk to so and so, and like that's how I met John. Like I interviewed Mike Barish, and he's like, you should talk to John Field, and then I talked to John Field, and he's like, you should talk to so, and it's kind of just grew. And
Yeah.
these are like the movers and shakers in this community, this post 9/11 health consequence communities. These are the movers and shakers, and they were also like nice and understanding, and I think they deal with it every day, so they knew that I wasn't some schmuck coming from NYU, no offense NYU, but like with
Yeah.
like looking for the next story, like it was personal to me, and I think because of that fact, they were sympathetic to me and helped me out.
What was the process like? Was it just you and Jerry doing the interviews and then over
Essentially,
time
yeah.
you edited? Was it just a two-man band? How did it all come together?
So it was me and Jerry initially, right? And for like the first year, I was just collecting footage. And then we would hire other people if we needed an extra camera, or if Jerry couldn't do it, he recommended somebody, and we would hire a freelancer. We brought a sound guy in, Dolmore. He helped us out. So all in all, I mean, hands-on production, right? Like filming and all that. Maybe like at most at one time 5 people, right? But
Oh,
essentially, it was me and Jerry from beginning to end, and Jerry edited everything. We had a few other editors come in as like consultants to help us with the story and like stitch together little pieces to give us a footing, like to give us a platform to jump off, which was super
right.
helpful. But ultimately, in the end, Jerry was the man behind the computer, and I was kind of like helping him with storyline.
That's amazing. So what does that mean now? So you made that film and I know what you do, but what do you do for
Yeah,
everyone else
right,
listening?
right. So what I do is I now work at a law firm, right? There goes the full circle story, and I do like the community outreach and advocacy. So a lot of my work here is just getting the word out to all these different little groups, that big groups or little groups, that might not know they're entitled to 9/11 benefits with the health program, the 9/11 health program, World Trade Center health program, and the 9/11 victim compensation fund. I mean, you have people that are obviously going to benefit from it, who are the responders, right? But then you have all these people that came in from every state in the United States to help, and the whole country has been affected by this. I mean, the health program has people in every state in the program, and then there are these other little pockets of people you don't think about. For example, um, residents, students that went to school down here. There's like 16 schools down that are in the zone. Um, Workers, office workers, people that came in from internationally to help out. I mean, you had people coming in from Central America and South America that dealt with earthquake recovery with like cadaver dogs, and they know how to navigate rubble. They were brought in. Street cart vendors. I mean, it's really endless. I mean, there's a jail down here that was filled with people that
Wow, I didn't know
are
that.
eligible. Yeah, and then you got. I mean, there's a million things. Like we represent homeless people. So you
Right.
have Wall Street one percenters that were going. to trade that morning, and then you got like streetcar vendor and the homeless guy. So it's really this fallout, this attack was very democratic in the sense of who it affected, and it's across the board. It's really
Yeah.
ignorant to race, color, gender, whatever it is. It's equal opportunist in that respect.
And do you feel like, I know that when the bill was first passed, I don't even think cancers were included in that like first version of it, or am I mistaken
No,
with
no,
that?
you're right. So in the first version, and John probably can speak to this better than I can, but in the
Yeah.
first version, they didn't include cancers because they knew it never would get passed,
Okay.
right? So if they put all these cancers in, they were going to be like, you're out of your control. This is insane. Get out of here. But what they did is that they said they were smart to do this. The people that drafted the bill and the lobbyists is they set up a medical advisory board of professionals that had the authority to add new conditions as data manifested, right? So they knew that in that first batch they weren't going to get the cancer included, but they knew that if they installed this board of medical professionals, they would add cancers down the line, and that's exactly what happened.
That makes sense. And also very smart of them. They knew what they were
Smart,
doing.
yeah. I mean, they're dealing with the feds in DC. They're terrible in my opinion, but
What do you think was like the most impactful thing you've learned from your work at the law firm doing all this advocacy?
at the firm, um, I mean, everybody has a story, right? I'm on the phone all day with people calling in to see if they're eligible, see if they can make a case. And part of my job is to screen them to see if we can help them, right? So I'm hearing thousands of stories every year from people, and it's like the sort of thing. Just when you think you heard it all, there's something else, you know. Um, I mean, that's the very human aspect of this, right? It's hearing stories, and they're endless, and there's still more to be heard and told. But the other thing too, I think, is like just the dysfunction of getting people taken care for in DC. I mean, this was a battleground. These were the people on the front lines, and to deny them health care, I think, is crazy. The fact that they had to go down there and fight sick and dying, as John will always say, in wheelchairs and oxygen tanks and canes, is absurd. And the fact that when they were there, they were treated kind of like shit. Like they weren't welcomed in with arms. Like they were constantly told, this is a New York problem. This isn't a federal United States problem. They were constantly told the budget, the budget, the budget. If it wasn't one excuse, it was the other. There were times when people wouldn't take meetings from him. Congressional members wouldn't take meetings from him, and then John put on his John Field lobbying hat, and the story changed a little bit. I think the biggest thing, though, is just the kind of dysfunction at the federal level of being looked after. You want to look after the people that look after you, right?
Yeah. I mean, that's why it's so frustrating, because these people flew across the country or the world and
to come and help. It's crazy.
It took them years to show up back for them. And I think that's kind of a pattern when you look at COVID and the people that showed up and how we treat them now versus then, and veterans. It's
100%.
We just have to be better.
100%.
Yeah. Not to be somber, but
this is it, baby. You're gonna laugh, you're gonna cry. You're gonna laugh, you're gonna cry. This is how it goes.
That's what I said in my intro. Is this podcast is literally focusing on heartbreak, but also happiness and beauty. And I'm trying to find the balance between the two in these interviews, because I don't want it to be
that's it.
super sad.
No, I mean, Ken Burns said it, right? Ken Burns said you got to lead them through hell, but you got to take them out. You got to show them what's up, but you got to show them the other side. So.
Yeah. And so this documentary, I know it's not out yet, or can people rent it on some place?
No, I'm working on it. When I know, you're gonna know. I think I'm really hoping for this year, though, to have it somewhere where people can rent it or stream it.
Cool.
Time has come.
Yeah, I think that would be amazing. And is this your first film? What's the plan?
This is the first one. I would love to do another one. It's just I got to get this one somewhere and living. And, I feel like I've been pregnant for 3 years. Feeling? I just feel like I've been pregnant for 3 years. I've been in labor for a year and a half. And it's just not, I'm trying to birth it. And it's tough because I think the palette, this is just my opinion now, but the palette for 9/11 is something that comes up with certain years, right? So we're at 20, what is it? We're in 2024, so we're coming up. It's 23 years, right? 22 years. And you only get the buzz on the anniversary,
Hmm.
9/11, a couple days before, a couple days after, not even after so much. Um, and then the big anniversaries. So we had the 20th, and now it's going to be like this, and 25 is going to come and it's going to spike up. Is that unfortunate? Yes. Do I understand why it's like that? Yes. But I just think the appetite for this is only hot when it's the right time.
Well, I feel like that's also like silly to me because I feel like why do it when everyone else is doing it? Like why
Well,
pick
that's
up
us,
something?
right? I
Yeah.
know, I know, I know, I
It's
know.
like why don't you do something when not everyone's talking about it? Because that's when it needs to be talked about. So I don't know. I'm gonna start making phone calls for this documentary.
Thanks, Chris. Appreciate it.
But I do. So I have three questions for you.
What do you got?
Um, they're a bit more uplifting.
Oh,
So
perfect.
let's try this out. What's the most beautiful thing you've learned, whether it's doing the documentary or it's doing the law firm work? What is the most beautiful thing you've learned?
Most beautiful thing I've learned is more of something I experienced. And I would say that is I am part of a community that I never wanted to be part of. It's a community I thought I dodged back in 2001, right? Because you had this community of people that were killed that day. But let me tell you something. It's a community of people who I would go to war with. You know, they're people that I love very much. I have friendships that I never would have had otherwise. And there's this support system and network of individuals that, like I said, I would never would have met had this not happened. The circumstances for meeting, of course, are not the best, you know, not ideal. But if there's a silver lining in anything, that's it. You know, I've been surrounded by people and I continue to be surrounded by people. Like, and that's the thing, this work never really is over, right? Like, this event isn't over until the, you know, last infant that was born on 9/10 grows up, hopefully, to live a long life and passes away. Because that's what we're looking at. I mean, there is a timeline on this thing, right? There is like an end point at some point. It's going to be a long time, but it will end at some eventually. But yeah, between now until the day I die, I guarantee you, I'm just going to meet more and more people in this circle, and I'm very grateful for that.
And I think like even the people that weren't born, like they're still in a way affected if their parents are
Oh
sick
yeah,
or like
100%,
it's like
a
it
hundred
keeps
percent.
going. But again, I agree. There is kind of like an end point. Like,
Yeah, I mean, think
um,
about the people that were pregnant and on 9/11, their husbands were killed. Like those kids,
yeah,
you know, they're living with it, and they came into the world after. So you have
yeah.
100%. You're right.
Second question: what is giving you the most energy right now?
It's giving me the most energy right now. It's tough, babe.
Yeah.
Um, that's a good question. I think gratitude is really kind of something that I've always thought I had, but then after my dad died and I started doing this work, it makes you reevaluate life a bit differently. Like we'll have a number over our head. Our time's going to come up someday. You know, we're not all going to die happy in our beds, tucked in, but you have to live as if I don't know. What gives me energy is like knowing that you got to seize the day every day, and you kind of have to take advantage of everything. And you got to go to dinner with this person. You got to be a yes person, right? You got to live life. And I think in some strange way, death has given me energy, is what I'm trying to say. You know, like that cloud over your head is like, it's there, it lingers, you know, it's there. And I think everybody's aware of this. Some people hide from it, some people face it. But I think just my experience with my dad and just like talking with all these other people that have passed away or are sick, it really forces you to like kind of take stock of what's important and how to move forward. And I think the biggest driving force that does to a person is it kind of, if they're wise and open and listen and a little bit zen, it gives them like a lust for life that you just got to live like you're going to die tomorrow, you know?
I love that. I think I don't know where I saw this, but it was talking about kind of along those lines of yeah, you have one life, but you have also have every day. So like instead of looking at it like okay, you have one life, it's
Yeah,
like think about how much
right.
amazing things can happen in one day and how many days
Mhm.
you have over time. Like that is really, really cool.
It
I
escapes
love that.
us. Yeah, it
Yeah.
escapes us. I mean, I understand why, I get it, but you have to constantly
Life.
remind yourself. You got to boil it down to like this moment, the next, and then take it from there.
Do you do any like practices on the daily, or is it more of like just a awareness in your everyday life now?
I think what I just told you, I don't follow all the time. Like do as I say, not as I do. It's hard to really like keep it in check. But I do have like certain routines where like I kind of am nurturing that mindset. Like wake up, be happy, like you woke up, like it's raining, that's
Right.
okay. I like the rain. You know what I mean? You have to like really kind of hype yourself up. Um, which is not easy. I'm not saying any of this is come with ease.
Right. It's like active. It's like you have to
Yeah,
try.
man, it's like working out. You got to like keep it going. And the first thing you have to do in the morning is literally take the blanket of doubt off yourself and get out of
Hmm.
bed and then just go for it.
Yeah. I go to the beach every morning, even if it's like 2 degrees, and I write in my gratitude journal, and I like to like put my feet in the sand, even if they're so
So I'm
cold, because
preaching
it
to the
like
choir. Like you get it.
it
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
so grounding to like
Yeah.
just shock yourself a little bit. You're like, oh, I'm alive. That's
Yeah.
really cool.
It's like the cold plunge, right? Everyone's doing the cold plunge now. Every
Yeah.
time you get in the cold
I'm not
plunge,
there
think about,
yet.
well, yeah, don't worry. When the time comes.
I'm gonna get there. Okay, last one. What is something exciting you have planned for this year?
This year, what do we got coming up this year? 2024. Oh, Jesus. My friends asked me what my New Year's resolution was. I didn't have one. I'm one of those people that doesn't believe in New Year's resolutions. And I said, bring
Fair.
my lunch to the office, right? Like, I gotta start small. So, I mean, 2024, I actively told myself is going to be a year of small victories. Like, I'm not going to like look for like these big things to achieve. I'm just going to like take it little by little because I can't make plans necessarily. You make plans and God laughs at you. So I'm
Yeah,
just
it's
kind of like,
true.
look at us, right? This is the third time we tried to do this. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, so I think it's just kind of my plan for 2024 is going to be different than previous years because I had really big plans the past years and nothing panned out for me the way I wanted it to, specifically in regards to my work, right, my documentary. So this year I'm just going to like kind of surrender a little bit and just let the tide take me. Or I'm going to ride it out a little bit, yeah.
I love that. I think everyone should do that. I think I should do that.
Does that we can do it together?
All right,
I'll get my
let's do
journal
it.
too. I'll start sticking my toes in the sand. We'll do it together.
Let's do a pact.
Ready?
Yeah, thank you so much for coming on. I know like all of this is really vulnerable and you're sharing a lot of personal things, so I really, really appreciate you taking the time and hopping on. It means a
No,
lot.
babe. I'm happy you have me. I'm happy you're doing this. You're just another person in my network that I've met in the course.
I
You're part of
know.
it. You see how it works? I'm telling you, it's good. It's good
It's
stuff.
beautiful. It is a great community.
Good stuff.